All right, guys, we have Tyson Chartier on the line, coach from the New England Cartel, and also a part of management for mixed martial arts, coaches for top-ranked contenders Rob Font in the bantamweight division and Kelvin Kattar at 145 pounds in the UFC's featherweight division. So how are you doing, Tyson?
I'm good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. Well, let's start it off. Obviously, we have the huge fight coming up this weekend that everybody's getting ready for. Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Justin Gaethje. Probably one of the most look forward to fights in a long time. You know, how do you see that fight playing out stylistically for both guys? And what are your overall thoughts on that?
Obviously, it's an exciting fight. You know, you're seeing one of the guys that could establish himself as the GOAT going against one of the, I guess you would say, purest fighters there is. You know, this guy just gets in there and fights, and Gaethje. So it makes for an exciting, clash of styles. Like, Gaethje obviously wants to keep it standing. Khabib wants it on the ground. So, who can ever impose their game plan on the other is obviously going to win. But I did a couple interviews already about, my take on the fight. And, I think it's a 50-50 fight. It's just going to be whoever is able to execute their game plan. And I think, if Gaethje is able to control the cage, I think that'll force some open mat wrestling, some panic wrestling from Khabib, which I don't think he's as successful as he is when he pushes guys against the fence and then ragdolls them. So
right.
I think Gaethje's got a really smart coach in Trevor Whitman. He showed a higher fight IQ in his last couple fights. So I think if he's able to control the center, not laying on lean on big shots, but just kind of pepper him a little bit and then sprinkle in some bigger shots, to maybe take out the lead leg a little. I think you're going to see Khabib panic wrestle a little bit. And then, Gaethje's obviously got a high level of, American-style wrestling. Iaquinta was able to stop some of those shots in the open mat. And, I just see Gaethje being able to do it. And, and then one other thing that, no one's really talking about, obviously, Khabib is just so dominant. But if you look at 4 of his last 5 fights, he was going against 45ers, guys that are now fighting up. And there's no way that Gaethje's ever making 45. Like, he's just a really big 55. So a big 55 with All-American Division I college wrestling, and then, really well-rounded striking game with a good coach. I just, I picked Gaethje in it. I think it's a 50-50 fight, but I just think that Gaethje's going to be able to get done.
Yeah, I agree. I picked Gaethje as well. I think what you brought up is like Khabib is normally used to being the guy who always puts the pressure on the opponent. His whole game is based off of pressuring you back, pressuring you to the fence, not giving you space in the open. And if he shoots in the open, it's usually to drive you to the fence. And I think that with Gaethje being a guy who just pushes forward and puts the pressure on Khabib, it's going to make him panic wrestle. And it's something that Khabib's never fought before. I don't think he's fought a guy who can push the pace and push you back like Gaethje does in all of his fights.
Yeah, I'm excited for it, man. Well, it's Khabib's such a beast, but I think, this guy, maybe he won't get it done, but I think he has the skill set to do it. So I'm excited to see how it plays out.
For sure. Well, let's talk about, obviously, the guys you coach, Rob Font, just got a huge fight announcement against Marlon Moraes, ranked number, I believe he's 4 now in the division after 3? Okay, 3. Okay, so ranked 3rd in the division. And that's a huge fight for Rob, obviously coming back after that win over Ricky Simone. So what did you think of Moraes, the fight against Sandhagen? What do you think went wrong in that fight? And how do you think Rob can implement his game plan against a guy like Marlon Moraes?
I don't think anything necessarily went wrong for Marlon. I just think he struggles with certain styles and certain things he doesn't deal with. I think we're catching him at the right time. I did an interview a couple weeks ago with ESPN about who I thought would win that main event, and I picked Corey Sandhagen because I think Marlon doesn't deal well with movement. I think Marlon's, it's tough when you see guys change gyms. It's always kind of a red flag, like later in their career. Obviously it could be nothing, but you saw him in between that 2nd and 3rd round. You saw Mark in the Cejudo fight. Mark Henry, you could tell he broke in that fight in the 3rd round. The 2nd round he started breaking. And Mark Henry's yelling at him about his mom. So that makes you kind of question his mental toughness. They've probably seen him quit before. They needed to light a fire under his ass. And then in that third round, he just kind of wasn't there. And then, obviously got stopped. And then you go to the Aldo fight, and, he won, but you could argue that he lost that fight. and then come forward to the last fight that he just fought Corey, and right away he tried to bully him, and when he realized he couldn't do it, it's like he kind of broke, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just think I've always said that Rob can beat anyone in the top 10. He just has to show up, and there's been a couple nights where if you look at that Pedro Munoz fight, Rob was putting it on him and then deviated a little bit. He kind of lost focus, and a focused Rob for 15 full minutes is a really dangerous Rob,
right?
And he knows that. So I think Rob's got championship caliber skills, and I think he's deserving of a top 3 fight, even coming off a layoff. He's won 2 in a row against Pettis and then Simone. Both guys are tough outs, and so he gets to get back in there. And I think coming off a long layoff, some people are going to be like, oh, well, this is a big step up coming off a major injury. It's like, yeah, but Rob's been in the UFC since 2016. He's fought tough guys. He's been ranked almost the whole time. He's earned these fights, and I think Rob's such a, he's just such a dedicated athlete and strong-willed fighter that I think he's going to be more up for this fight than he would if he was fighting someone unranked.
Right.
Obviously there's a big upside to it, but at the same time, it's like I think he's going to put that little chip on his shoulder of people saying, oh, this is too much too soon. You should hold on. But no, man, he's going to come out and prove that, him and Calvin are both contenders.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of years ago, everybody was talking about Rob Font, and then all of a sudden Calvin burst on the scene. Rob got injured,
mm-hmm.
and now Calvin's getting a lot of attention. But they're both beasts, bro. Like,
yeah,
they're both top 5 fighters that can fight for a title, and I'm just excited to see him get this opportunity and take the bull by the horns and create some momentum.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of people, I don't think they forgot about Rob Font because I think people know he's a dangerous fighter, but he's been gone for a while because of his injury. I remember when I got to interview him last time, he was doing physical therapy, just really recovering from the injury, getting ready to come back. And I've always liked Rob Font. I think he's got one of the best jabs in MMA. I think his jab is super crisp and super clean. And I hope he comes in and makes a statement. I think this is a perfect fight. It's a dangerous fight, but I think that's exactly what he needed to come back and show the world how good he really is in that 135-pound division.
Yeah, I think he's trying to, we're trying to come out on December 19th to make a statement and show the world that there's another contender.
Yeah. Well, we'll go off with Kelvin Kattar, obviously his teammate. You coach him as well. He's due for a huge fight next. And the only guy I could think of for him to get next is Max Holloway. I think Max and Kelvin is the perfect fight for 145. Is he looking to get on that December 19th card as well with Rob?
That'd be great, but obviously, if the fight's Max has a lot of say in that, and we're kind of in a holding pattern, waiting to see what happens with him because that's the logical fight to make. And we're just seeing how it plays out. Max earns the right, being the GOAT of the division. I think he's earned the right to, kind of call his shots and fight when he feels like fighting and not be rushed into it. So,
right.
We'll see how it plays out and see how the timetables work. Like, if, in a perfect world, yeah, we fight Max December 19th. It's the main event. Rob can be the co-main event. But, as of right now, it doesn't look like that's what's going to happen. So, Calvin's just in camp now with Rob. Rob's training. Calvin's at the sessions. Rob's doing strength and conditioning. He's, I always say, like, they're at, like, an 80% training schedule when they don't have a fight. And then once we get that fight agreement, things just get dialed in,
Right.
That last 20% gets shored up, and then we're, specific focus training on who we're fighting, and then obviously trying to peak to be ready to go 3 or 5 hard rounds on that night.
Yeah, and going off of Max as a potential opponent for Kelvin, what do you think? How do you think that plays out stylistically? I mean, obviously, I wouldn't want you to give away any of the game plan you would have set for Kelvin, but what do you think the main advantages are? I mean, but I know, obviously, I think the boxing, I think his hands are better, but what do you think the main advantages are for Kelvin against a guy like Max?
I think anybody could argue that we have a clear power advantage.
Yeah.
We're putting guys, we're rolling guys' eyes at the back of their head and put them in the hospital where, Max, obviously he's the best that's ever done it in our division. He's putting away some guys, but it's more of a volumes approach. And, he's going to touch you and then, as he kind of wears you down, maybe he finishes you. But we're putting guys to sleep, and Calvin's dangerous. He's got that one punch knockout, and now he's showing that he's evolving as a fighter. He's got more tools now. He's really filled up some of those Muay Thai holes that he's had. People haven't even seen his, they haven't seen his wrestling. They haven't had to yet, really. They showed a little bit in the Ige fight, but people always joke around because he's a blue belt, but really he's got black belt level jiu-jitsu.
Right.
He just hasn't put the gi on enough. So, yeah, I think the biggest thing is that people can say about that fight is Calvin's got the power, and Max probably has a volume advantage where he's shown to be willing to throw more in fights than Calvin has, and that's something that's easily fixable on our end.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm hoping that's what he gets next, because I just think that's the perfect fight for him. Going off of the striking game as a coach and just seeing people at the elite level on a daily basis, what is an area of the striking game that you think people at the highest levels tend to overlook or take for granted?
I just think they're not drilling enough. Like, I think everybody thinks you're going to go out there and just hit mitts all the time, and they're not hitting the technical stuff. Like, I think a lot of MMA fighters, like, if you watch a boxer shadow box and then go watch an MMA fighter shadow box, it's very different.
Yeah.
Obviously it's a different sport, but if you're going to box in MMA, like, it's still, you're on a 1 or a 2 or whatever. But I just think that people have a bad habit of kind of like jumping into sparring and hitting mitts before they really learn how to punch right. And I think if you look at Calvin and Rob, you could argue that Calvin's got the best jab in the 45 division, Rob's got the best jab in the 35 division.
100%.
And they both got like real clean hands. Rob started learning from a professional boxer Calvin started learning from Mickey Ward and his team right when he started striking. He learned how to punch the correct way right away. Which I think has translated into him carrying a lot more power in MMA than others have. And then I think with Rob, it was more of just he naturally had a good jab. I remember the very first time Rob sparred with the fight team, I was one of the first rounds he did it with, and I was a lot more advanced than he was at the time. And, I kind of went light with him during the round, took him down, kind of threw him around a little bit because he didn't really know ground yet. But then I remember after the round, I said to him, like, well, listen, you have a really good jab. Like, he caught me with, like, probably 2 or 3 jabs, like, out of nowhere. And I was like, wow, that was crisp. Like, snapped right at the end, caught me off guard. It was quick. I was like, oh, shit. Like, this chubby, because I thought he was kind of chubby. He weighed, like, 190 pounds and a little belly on him. And I'm like, man, this chubby kid's got a good jab. And I said it to him after round, hey, you got a really good jab. You should use it more. And he said, oh, okay, cool. And so I think it's just something that, naturally he had a good one. And he's been able to, build a mind frame around it and a skill set that supports it, and he knows when to use it, when not to use it. Right. And so the biggest thing, and I think so people, they don't learn the correct technique right from the start, and then they develop bad habits, and then they build everything around a poor foundation.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. I think, do you think that, like, taking it slow in the beginning and just maybe you just throw your jab out pretty slow in the beginning and just get the movement down, and then you pick it up, and then you go into sparring? I mean, I think that's go ahead.
That's how a lot of boxing gyms do it. You go to boxing gym the first couple of months, they're just saying, get on that bag, and you're only throwing a jab. And you don't even learn it to. Like, you don't even learn a hook for months, so they really want to make sure that you have a good jab down before they even show you anything else. So, I think in MMA, it's these people come in the gym and they want to fight before they even train. They're like, oh, I want to get a fight. I want to fight. And it's like, well, slow down, man. Like, you don't know anything, And they try to run before they can walk.
100%. And going off of drilling and everything like that, what do you think is like the most overlooked aspect of footwork and being able to manage the range effectively in MMA? Because, compared to boxing, the range is so much different. You have to worry about so many more weapons, and you have to worry about being a little bit extra outside the distance of the kicking range and then being able to step back in and get out. What do you think is an area that a lot of elite level fighters or just people in general tend to overlook with managing range and their footwork?
So, like, I'm not going to go in over my head here. Like, I'm not a striking coach by any means. I got a grappling background.
Yeah.
I'm an MMA coach, so I'll talk strategy on the feet and stuff like that. So we have a great coach, Jake Manini. He's the Muay Thai coach for those guys, and then we have a boxing coach, Sean Farley.
Right.
I work with both those guys, and I'm kind of the MMA coach that kind of feeds it all together and then filters it out. But the thing, so I don't want to speak for them, but the thing I see from my end, just looking at from as an MMA coach, is I think that, like, people don't do enough, like, light sparring or, like, drill sparring, Yep. People get out there and they want to feel like they got their 3-5s, maybe their 5-5s, and I won. But it's like, okay, well, what did you learn? But, like, So now when you're going into like, if Calvin and Rob are just kind of play sparring, right?
Right.
And then they're able to try things in a safe environment, then they start to realize like, oh, if I'm this close, I can get this off. If I'm too far away, I can't get this. So now, how does my footwork get me to where I need to be to throw that strike? And then they start playing with it.
Yeah.
And so then you're getting the reps, you're getting it in a safe manner, you're not taking the damage, and then you truly are learning the range that you need to be in to throw certain strikes. And I always equate it to like, when you go to batting cages, if you get it there right away, you just go into the fast pitch, you're going to have a hard time catching up with the ball, right?
Right.
But if you start out with the slow one, get some reps in. Then you go to the medium, you get some reps in. And when you go to the fast one, it doesn't seem that fast, so they'll probably hit a lot more.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of the same thing with, with striking, is you got to slow it down a little bit, and you start to see things. You get good habits with the head movement. You're able to focus on technique while you're doing these things and developing good habits rather than just trying to survive a tough round.
Yeah.
And there is a place for that. These young kids got to be able to survive these tough rounds, so that when they feel that in a fight, they don't crumble. But I think that enough fighters probably aren't doing enough play sparring or drill sparring just to get the reps in.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you hit it on the head with that one too. I think everybody tries to go in and look to land power shots and look to win rounds, like you said. But if you just work on your technique and just work on landing the combinations and working it out, then that's the most important thing, because you're used to doing that. I mean, I think I've seen a lot of. I mean, I'm not a coach or anything. I've trained for a long time, but I'm not a coach by any means. But I think a lot of people nowadays kind of go into gyms and just look to get into wars to say they got into a war. And I don't know. I don't think that's the smartest idea. Is that what you would say?
Yeah, you're not getting paid to train, so you got to be safe with your partners, and that's why we have a small team, the Cartel. Like, we have a small group that we mess around with, and we only bring in select training partners. And when they're heavy sparring, like when it's like camp and we're doing for like Rob's MMA sparring for this camp, I'll be at every single session. And if I start to feel like, hey, listen, this isn't what we're looking for, I'll say something mid-round, Unfortunately, we bring in the right guys. We don't have to do that too much, but there's been times in the past that, I have to pull certain guys and say, hey, listen, that's not what we're looking for. Like, let's tone it down a little bit. Or, when they start throwing big knees up the middle and stuff, it's like, hey, listen, like, he's 3 weeks out of a fight. This is his livelihood. You're not trying, you shouldn't be throwing knees up the middle way.
Right.
You're gonna hurt this kid. So I think, some people get a little chippy, but we have a small team, really, really close group, family-like environment, and everybody takes care of each other.
Yeah.
So fortunately, we don't, it's not like a big box gym where you're going to go in and you're going to have that, that local guy trying to take out the big guy to get the coaches to know something.
Right. Right. Obviously you've had experience. You watch tape a lot, and I saw you posted on your Instagram story. You were watching tape on Marlon with with the Marlon and the Henry Cejudo fight. What is it like having to watch tape on all of the elite guys and then have to relay what you see to your fighters that you have to coach and set up a game plan? I would think. I watch tape for my podcast and stuff. I love doing it. I'm not a coach, like I said, but how do you enjoy watching tape and having to break it down and then give it to Kelvin and Rob and everybody else that you work with?
Yeah, man, this is my fight now. I used to be an athlete and I used to compete, and as you get older and your body breaks down and you can't do it anymore. So I figured out another way to get that same feeling. I watch these tapes and. And I know it sounds silly, but it's like right now I'm trying to coach against Conan, the ATT coach that coaches Marlon. Like, I'm trying to out-coach him right now.
Yeah.
So like I'm sitting there and watching that, and I'm competing with him. Like, I'm like, no, I'm going to put in a better camp than his coaches, so Rob's more prepared. And then, and like I said, I know that's silly, but it drives me and it motivates me to do better. And I think it takes me to another level that Rob and Calvin deserve. So, when I watch film, I'm just going through and I'm looking for tendencies, I'm looking for strengths, I'm looking for weaknesses. I'm looking for patterns. I'm so comfortable with their movement that on fight night, like, I'm yelling it before they see it. I always use like an example. Like, I know there's I can't even remember what fight it was, but Rob was fighting, and he was in there, and the guy was about to throw something spinning, and I go, here it comes, and like Rob just kind of like nodded his head,
Yeah.
And after the fight, he's like, I knew exactly what you meant, because we were both on the same page.
Yeah.
Seeing it so much, we talked about it in training, and in the fight, I was like, here it comes, because I saw that movement and he saw it too,
Yeah.
And I'm putting together like, little videos, of like the same movements over and over, so they start to see what it looks like. And then, so the next time that guy goes to throw X, Y, or Z in the fight, they've already seen it hundreds of times on videos that it becomes a trigger in their head. That's not something that they're going to be surprised by.
Yeah.
So it's fun, man. It's challenging. It's a lot of work. You know, and I think it's something that a lot of MMA coaches don't do enough, and I think they take it for granted. A lot of times I see like coaches will go through and watch a couple of fights and like, yeah, I'm good. Here's what we're gonna do. Well, no, you're not good. Like I remember Thomas Almeida. The kid was like 22-2, I think, when we fought him, and I'm like, Jesus, like how, you know, he got clipped in a couple of fights before us, but it was Cody Garbrandt and Jimmy Rivera. Like that doesn't mean you suck, you know. And I'm like, wait, it took me forever to figure out exactly what that guy's major weakness was, and then when I found it, like. I was like, holy shit, like, this is it. And then we went out there and we fought, and Rob executed perfectly. And, you know, that window was there. The window that we found in watching the video, and we thought that would be there, and we noticed his habits. It was there on fight night, and Rob exposed it real fast.
Yeah, I remember that Rob fight. I think it was at UFC 220 against Almeida. And that was actually on my birthday, because I remember I was watching the card, and I was so excited for him to fight Almeida. But I was worried, you know, because at that time, you know, Almeida was one of the most dangerous guys in that division. I mean,
scariest dudes.
Yeah, like you said, he lost to.
We're fighting him coming off a loss.
Yeah, you know? I mean, you fought. He had fought Garbrandt right before that, and then before that, I think was when he knocked out Brad Pickett or something like that. I feel
think
like
he had like Jimmy Rivera and some other guys. But
yeah.
Either way, he was a scary dude. Like I remember people talking about him. Like, he was going to be the next guy. And you know, I was in the locker room at I think it was UFC 189 when he knocked out Brad Pickett. And I remember everybody talking about the locker room, like, that kid's a freak. And then all of a sudden, you know, fast forward another 2 years, and we're fighting him, and I'm supposed to come up with a way to beat him.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, Jesus. Like, at the time, Cody Garbrandt was Cody Garbrandt, and Jimmy Rivera was on, like, an 18-fight win streak. And we're Rob Font coming off a loss. And I believe in Rob Font's skills, but I'm like, well, we just left our gym. We started a new team, and now here we are fighting Thomas Almeida. Like, what the hell? And it was like, it was a lot of pressure, but I think that was kind of our coming out party as the New England Cartel. Like, we didn't even have a team name yet, but we went out that night, and you know, Rob and Calvin both got knockouts, and you know, I think there was a lot of trust built that night.
Right. You know, obviously you've had experience coaching and having to coach somebody on Fight Island with Kelvin when he fought Dan Ige. What is it like, you know, the setting of Fight Island and having to go through all this during the coronavirus pandemic? Like, do you enjoy it more that it's more like a more calm of an environment with no crowd, or do you like the crowd and having to, you know, be in the corner and give advice to your fighters? Do you like it more that there's no crowd because of what the times we're in right now, or do you like having the energy of the crowd?
I mean, I feel bad for the fighters not having the crowd, because I think they're getting, you know, some precious moments are being stolen from them. But from a coaching standpoint, I love it. You know, like, they can hear me better. You know, there's no crowd to sway the judges. There's, you know, you don't have to scream as loud. You know, they can always hear you. You can, you know, bring a more calm demeanor in between rounds, because if the crowd's too loud, you kind of have to talk up a little bit. And, you know, I like it as a coach, and I think it's interesting, because I think a lot of people at home are seeing how much. Because, you know, before that, I think before this pandemic, I think a lot of people were thinking, you know, I can say the casuals are at home thinking, like, well, you're the guy that carries the bucket and then, like, holds his shirt. Like, yeah, but I also coach during the fight. Like, wow, we can't even hear you, you know? And I think now, with this pandemic, I think you're starting to see, like, people understanding how much, like, coaching goes on during a fight that people never knew about.
Yeah.
You know, and you're starting to see the adjustments. They're focusing more on the adjustments in between rounds of, like, what do the coaches say, and then talking about that. So I think it's interesting. I think you're starting to see how much chess playing there is going on.
Yeah, I know from my perspective, I like it way better without the crowd. I mean, you can hear the shots landing. You can hear the coaches giving the advice mid-round, in between the rounds, during the rounds. I like it a lot more. I mean, I'm sure once the crowds come back, we're all going to be like, oh, we like that better. But obviously, like you said, from a coaching standpoint, it's a lot calmer of a demeanor. I think it's more intense, actually, because you know, it's almost like sparring. I mean, it's not the same, obviously, because you're in a fight, but it feels like you're in that gym and you're sparring a little bit. Is that kind of what you feel?
Yeah, I mean, it's got that gym feel to it. You know, we've always had small groups around in the gym when we spar, and you know, once we got the Jeremy Stevens fight in, you know, it was going to be in front of no crowd. We adjusted training. We shut the music off during training. We kind of dimmed the lights outside the cage and made it try to be a little bit more realistic. And, a semblance of what we're going to feel on fight night and make it a little bit uncomfortable. Like, wow, it's really quiet in here. Because a lot of times just fun, there's music playing and stuff. So we made some generic adjustments based on that to try to make the fighter feel more comfortable. But, yeah, man, I mean, we'll be excited when the crowd comes back. But it'll just be, we'll make those adjustments when it happens.
What do you think is, you said you were competing against another coach with Conan Silveira and working with Marlon Moraes. You're trying to out coach him, figure it out. Who is one of the coaches you enjoy listening to or taking, like, I wouldn't say taking advice from, but who is a coach you look at to like model your coaching style after? Obviously every coach is different. Everybody has their quirks and their different, strategies and styles, but who is somebody you look at to be like, okay, like that's a good coach right there. That's how you do it.
Man, I think there's a lot of coaches that I kind of poach from, and, different coaches that have different styles and, they take little things here and there. And then there's a lot of things that I see coaches do that I'm like, I learned not to do, and some coaches, maybe scream. But it's hard because it's like I don't know the relationship between that fighter and that coach. So it's like for me to be like, oh wow, he's screaming too much, he's gonna calm down. It's like, well, maybe that fighter needs that, So I try to be pretty open minded with that. It's just like a relationship. I can't tell someone else how to run their marriage because I'm not in it. Right. What works for them might not work for me. So I respect that. But really, my style, like my coaching style, really came from my jiu-jitsu coach, Chris Owen.
Okay.
He was, he'd always be on the side of the mats, and then coaching me during practice and during matches and stuff like that. He had a really calm demeanor, and then he cornered me for all 15 of my fights. And then he had a really calm style. He wouldn't talk about things that he shouldn't be talking about. Like, he kind of knew his lane. He, he understood the mental part of it. Like, he always tried to keep me calm and confident, and his demeanor in the locker room is something I took a lot away from, because some of my coaches early on were like frantic in the locker room and all nervous and be like, oh my God, did you see? We'd be out back about to walk. I'm like, oh shit, that guy looks really strong. Like, why are you telling me that right before a fight? And this, my coach Owen, he never fought, but he understood the mental side of it. And that's one thing, like, I really always carried with me is that, listen, like, if I'm going to be the guy in the corner, I have to carry this vibe and I have to set the tone. And I think that gets the ball rolling in the right direction. And, from the time we land on fight, obviously the whole camp, but then we get to fight week, and then everything that happens, it's like we're setting a tone the whole time, and we're trying to create a certain vibe in the room around the fighter. Right. So that everything's like, we're going into the fight, and he's just thinking about how he's going to win. And, even the last thing you say to him before they get in, and then, obviously the coaching during the fight, like, I talk to the other coaches a lot during the fights, And because you work with different coaches in the corner, and you start to learn their style and who's going to talk when and stuff like that, and you guys all come up with the pattern and all that. But I talk with a lot of other coaches mid-fight, and sometimes I have to tell them to talk more. Other times I have to tell them, hey, calm down. That's not going to work with this fighter, because he says there's another fighter that works. I'm like, no, that's not going to work with this guy. And so knowing when to, like, step up and tell, kind of like be the authoritarian with the other coaches, and knowing when to like let them do their thing and trust them, and then also knowing the fighter and what works for them. Because what works for Calvin in a fight does not work for Rob. They're very different fighters, and they need a different coaching style. So it's like you got to be like a chameleon. You got to adapt to what works for them. You can't just do, oh, this is what I do during a fight. Like, no, this doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what the fighter needs, and then you have to do that. So I think, yeah, man, I don't know. Like, I've always been, like, in terms of other coaches, I really have a good relationship with Eric Nixick and Sheen Couture. Me and him, I think, we're kind of two guys that put in a lot of work that maybe, we're not household names, like no one's, you talk about the best MMA coaches, you're talking about probably Faraz, Jackson, Mike Brown, those guys, Winkle John, you're never really mentioning Eric Nixick or Tyson Chartier. And I think me and him have always kind of bonded over that. It's like we're kind of the underdog coaches. We've built some great fighters, but, we're kind of still unrecognized, which is fine because it's not about us. But I think me and him kind of like have bonded over that as being kind of like the underdog coaches. And, so it's kind of us versus these bigger name coaches, and we're going to, we're going to go outsmart them and outwork them and stuff like that. So he's one guy that kind of, I don't want to say like mentored more like a colleague of mine, where we've been able to lean on each other over the last 2 years and kind of like grow in the sport together. And so he's someone I respect tremendously, because it's nice to have someone that is going through the same grind you.
Let's see. All right, we're back on. The next question I had for you was, you're also a manager, and a coach as well. What do you think is the most difficult part about managing fighters and having to deal with contract negotiations on a daily basis? What is the most difficult part about having to deal with stuff like that?
I think, like, I love negotiating. Like, when it comes to negotiating deals, it's like I used to be in, technology sales. I used to work at Oracle and, some other tech companies, and, closing that big deal. It's like, it's a rush, I love that. I love when I can go and get fighter a new contract, get him more money, and then give him that call and tell him, like, hey, man, we just got that new contract. And it's exciting. Like, it's like a rush. Like, I pump my fist, So that part I love. Like, I live for that part. The part that's tough is sometimes the expectations. I think, a lot of times if a fighter's frustrated with a situation, like right now, COVID, right?
Yeah.
Not a lot of local fights happening, So the pool of the number of fights that are available for guys that aren't in the UFC or Bellator is really, really small. So all these guys are competing to get these X number of fights. So there's going to be a lot of people that don't get fights. And I think a lot of people are, can get frustrated. And who are they going to get frustrated with? It's not going to be Donald Trump. It's not going to be, their coach. It's going to be like, well, what the freak, man? Why can't I get a fight? And it's like, and I get it. Like, they're totally validating of what they're upset about. But I can't make promotions start doing fights again. So then I think it's a little frustrating. And sometimes, like, with that stuff, when it's, I think the low-hanging fruit in MMA is to be upset with your manager if something's not going right. And but I think that's also warranted, because I think there's been a lot of shitty managers and a lot of scumbags. And, so managers you start off with some manager, the manager in itself just getting a bad reputation, like, oh, what do? They get paid to do what? So I think it's, the perceptions there that, they're crooks and they're liars and they're thieves, and what are they really doing for their money? It's stupid to have a manager. And then I think the other thing is, like, I think people have this perception that if a manager's not bringing you more in sponsors, then you're paying them on the fight purse, then they're not carrying their weight. And I think that's one way to look at it. But I also think that, like, a manager is kind of like an insurance policy. Like, if you pay Geico every month for a year, if you don't get in an accident, do you go back to Geico and say, hey, I want my money back? I didn't use you. It's like, you don't do that, but, like, if you get in an accident, you're freaking really glad you have insurance. And I think that's what a manager does. Like, I always say that I'm going to, especially once you get to the UFC, is like, I'm going to pay for myself in negotiations, Even if we get one fight earlier than we would have if you didn't have me, or we get a little bit more money because I pushed back, or whatever. Ideally, if I'm doing my job right, you're going to make more money after paying me than if you didn't have me.
Right. I think that's important. Like you said, the managers are always taken for granted until the fighter really needs the manager when they're in trouble. I think that's the biggest part. And you said that exactly. Like, with the insurance policy, you're the fighter's insurance policy. Like, they think they may not need you. You are important, but then once some shit hits the fan, the manager is who's there to help you pick up the pieces.
Yeah, and in case of emergency, pick up and call your manager.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happens, and you're supposed to fix everything. And this isn't me complaining. I'm just saying, like, part of the job is you're dealing with that perception and sometimes unhappy fighters for things like that. And, there's a lot that is out of your control. And, and I always say, like, I can really only promise two things when I work with the client. It's like, is I'm not going to lie, and I'm going to be responsive. Right. Other than that, like, there's a lot that's out of my control. I can knock on these doors, but if they're like, oh, we don't like that kid, it's like, I can't make them like you, Yeah. So it can be, it can be tough, but it can also be really rewarding. You're the one that gets to make those calls to a fighter who's been dreaming of getting in the UFC for years, and you get to make that call to him and his family and listen to him cry on the other end.
Yeah. Okay, let's go back a little bit to drilling and training methods. You talked about how drilling is the most important for guys at the elite level, and a lot of people tend to not drill as much as they should. What are some of your favorite drills to work on with fighters? Is there any, like, specific drills you love to do with your fighters when you're getting them ready for their next fight?
No, it's not any, like, specific drills. It's just, like, if you're wrestling, you got to drill wrestling. If you're doing Muay Thai, you got to drill Muay Thai. If you're boxing, you got to drill boxing. Like, if you're MMA sparring, you gotta, sometimes go light and play spar. When you're doing jiu-jitsu, it's like you gotta drill the basics. You can't just never drill a triangle because you're like, well, I know triangles, I don't have to do that. It's like everything's muscle memory. So every specific art, you just gotta keep drilling. Like when it's time to box, you gotta drill. When it's time to wrestle, you gotta drill. Like, I just think it can't be. Meat and potatoes is generally what wins fights.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not drilling the meat and potatoes, like you can't just bank on, I hit hard and I can throw spinning, flashy stuff.
Yeah.
So you got to drill the basics, and then once you have the basics so far down, then you can add in the flair.
Right. Yeah. Basics pay the bills, pretty much. That's how I look at it. Basics and fundamentals pay the bills. Okay. Well, we talked about drills. We talked about coaching. There's one specific area, and I think we've seen it a lot more in recent years with MMA, and it's stance switching. Switch stance combinations, maybe throwing a double jabs, right hand, switching to southpaw with the right hand, follow with a left hook. How important do you think stance switching is, and how important has it become to implement that into your game in the mixed martial arts competition we see now?
So I think you're seeing a lot more in the smaller guys.
Mm-hmm.
Because generally when you switch stances, your defense is going to be a little compromised.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be as good. That's the big knock on stance switching, right?
Yeah.
So there's more of a repercussion. Generally, the bigger guys hit a lot harder.
Mm-hmm.
So there's dire, more dangerous repercussions of switching stances when you're at a higher weight, because that one punch can put you out. Whereas the smaller weights, they're more focused on quickness and volume and kind of creating angles and stuff like that, and they can do that with stance switching. They can kind of flow. You see Dominic Cruz is kind of a pioneer of that, and now you're seeing a lot of guys do it.
Right.
I don't necessarily know if it's like an important thing that you necessarily focus on, but it's I think it's important that fighters know how to fight out of their weak stance, because especially now with one of the best weapons in MMA is the calf kick.
Right.
If someone takes out your lead calf, you're going to switch stances whether you know how to do or not.
Yep.
So you might as well practice it. And I think that's one thing that Rob has just really always had on his own, is he's always drilled his weak side, and now Calvin does it too. They do everything on their weak side as well. So it's like, yeah, they do have probably a weak side, but they're proficient from there and they've practiced defense. So their weak side is probably way better than other people's weak side,
Yeah.
So I think it's just important that, because you don't want to go southpaw for the first time in a fight because you get your left leg chewed up and you have to switch to southpaw. You don't know what the hell you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's exactly right. And it's funny you brought up the calf kick, because I've been talking about the calf kick forever. And it's so crazy how, in the last 2 years, how important and how damaging that calf kick has become. I think the first guy to really implement it in like the UFC was Benson Henderson. But now you see, what Henry Cejudo against Mighty Mouse, like he got hit with that calf kick, and immediately his foot was just twisting, his ankle was rolling around, and now everybody uses it. I think the gym that uses it the most, I would say, is probably the guys out of City Kickboxing in New Zealand. I think like guys like Brad Riddell and Kattar, France, I think that's a big thing for them. But it is crazy how damaging and how important that kick has become in the striking and the kickboxing game.
Yeah, I think it was kind of a novelty at first. You're kind of like, what was he doing? And then you got it effective. But then it's not something you can drill a ton in the gym, because you can really, even hurt people in the gym with that. Even when they have shin guards, it freaking hurts.
Yeah.
So it's like kind of one of those things you let loose in a fight. But now you're kind of seeing it's like it's a tool that everybody's got in their tool belt now.
Yeah.
I think some people leverage it and some people don't. Just like that front foot kick that that front kick that Anderson Silva did that. What's his face said he taught to him.
Vitor?
The guy with the ponytail.
Steven Seagal?
Ponytail. Yeah, Steven Seagal was like, I taught him that.
Yeah.
So I think that was like, people were like, what was that when it first happened? But now you see like it's just something people do.
Yeah, it's just normal.
Exactly. So I think you're starting to see that with the calf kick. And yeah, man, I was warming Tony Martin up for his fight against Neil Magny, and he dropped me with a calf kick in the warm up, and I was like limping out to the cage. And, it was bad. I was like, I don't know how the hell guys deal with those in a fight, but it's a dangerous weapon, man. And I think you're starting to see people leverage it a lot more, and you're starting to see, you look at the what was it? Cheeto Vera just got Sean O'Malley with it.
Yeah.
You know, you're starting to see a lot more of that. You know, I think it happened once in Bellator where Michael Chandler got dropped with the same thing by I don't remember.
That Brent Primus.
Yeah. Primus. Yep. Primus got him with that, and then Primus was training with Oyama. Oyama's out of California, same team as Cheeto, and so you're starting to see a lot of guys use it. You know, it's definitely something that you plan for going into a fight of trying to avoid letting that happen.
Yeah. Well, I think I basically covered all the questions I had for you. Do you have any questions for me?
No, man. Who do you said you got Gaethje Saturday night?
I do have Gaethje by I think I said third round knockout. He's got to catch him early, and if it goes to decision, I think he could possibly get a decision, but it's not looking good. So he's got to finish him in the first 3 rounds.
All right. Well, let's see what happens. I'm excited for it, though.
Me too, man. Me too. Is there anybody you want to plug? Anything you want to promote before we cut it off?
No, man. I appreciate all the people supporting. You know, my fighters that are with Top Game Management. You know, it takes a team to get these guys to the cage, and they all got great coaches and families and teammates. So I appreciate all of them for still believing in me. And then, you know, we've had a crazy amount of support over the last few months with the Cartel, with people going online about T-shirts and you know, sending messages of just support and stuff like that. And you know, it's cool to see the climb that, you know, we're on now as a team, and the recognition that these guys are starting to get on the national level, and especially Rob getting the number 3 fight now. And it was just cool. So I just, you know, we appreciate all the support, all the DMs, and you know, just keep staying tuned in. And December 19th, Rob's not gonna shock us, but he's gonna shock a lot of people. Yeah. Again, thank you again for, you know, giving me the opportunity to interview you. You know, like I said, it's hard getting out there when you're kind of new in the game, but thank you. I've got you, I've got Rob. I got to get Kelvin next, so I'm gonna have to work on getting Kelvin for the next one. We'll get him, man. All right. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, no problem. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Bye.